Hey, this is Bob Flaherty, the electric principal, and I am here with Brother Pat. And this is the beginning of season 2 of our Electric Principal podcast. I know we took a break for a while. It was a nice summer, had lots going on, but now it's winter and getting crummy in Wisconsin. So Badger Pat is back here, and we're
That's
and
right.
we're ready. We're ready to roll. And boy, have we got a ton of things to talk about. And the EV world has changed a lot since our last podcast. And so, basically the subject matter today is going to be a little wide ranging, but it's specifically we're going to talk about Ford and changes to the EV market and what the future looks like. And so I'm going to let Brother Pat start out with a discussion right now of, hey, what is going on with Ford? Very
Well,
disappointed.
well, uh, what's disappointing is that I think they worked really hard. They got in the game early in 2022, and they designed a really nice product. The or F-150 Lightning was a wonderful car, and I am using was. And if you've got one, chances are you know what a nice vehicle that is.
I
But
do have one, and I know.
and Ford has pulled the plug. So, Bob, why do you think Ford did that to a nice truck like yours?
Well, I tell you what, one of the reasons, the main reason is they aren't selling many of them. And I think every Ford dealership in the country should just look at the mirror that's in their restrooms and they'll see the enemy. It's themselves. Pat and I have traveled all over the country at EVs, and one of the things we normally do is we'll stop in at dealerships and we'll charge there. And that gives me an opportunity to talk to people who are selling these. And I can tell you, after being at 15 different dealerships minimum, the biggest problem is that when you're selling a brand new product like the Ford EV was, and you have people who know nothing about it, care nothing about it, don't understand it, trying to sell it, it's not going to sell. I mean, I'll give you a prime example, Pat. I walked into a GM dealer in Iowa, and I talked to the guys. They said, "Well, we've had a GM Hummer for a year, and we haven't been able to sell it." And I said, "Well, just tell me what would you tell a potential customer who walked in the door about that car, about that truck?" There was dead silence. They weren't going to talk about how efficient it is, how cheap it is to drive, how it can tow a gazillion pounds. That in almost every way it's superior to the gas version, except if you're going to tow every day with it hundreds of miles. Well, then guess what? You wouldn't consider the GM or the Ford as much as maybe a gas car, a gas truck. But let's face it, 90% of people who own trucks in America don't tow all that much. They might take their boat down to the lake. They might take their boat to the dealership. They might take a trailer 200 miles to their cabin. That's what most people do with trucks. And I'm telling you, that Ford is a magnificent vehicle. And I want your thoughts, Pat, on why Ford couldn't sell trucks and to a certain degree cars, but Tesla can.
Yeah,
Why is
well,
that?
I think number one, I think that the dealer network hurt that. I mean, if you remember when it first came out, I mean, dealers were jacking up prices and doing things with it that I think discouraged people. But I believe the number one reason is because people, when they work with their dealership, the focus on what can't it do, and they don't want to hear, well, if I want to tow my big camper, all the time, I'm going to have to charge, and the network isn't up to snuff. And, and I think largely the focus is on what can't it do, as well as my gas truck. It didn't really focus on, hey, you're going to be able to operate this a lot cheaper at home. Number two, you're not going to need oil changes and near the maintenance. Number three, it has a tremendous amount of performance with a 600 horsepower base dual motor system. And so I get that, and I get that, and I think the fourth thing is, and you shared this with me, is that we look at truck buyers as being very traditional, and a lot of those people never got on board, never really got on board. Frankly, I think they did sell them to a number of people as well who were new to pickup trucks, and thus they liked them, but they weren't able to convince it. And I think the biggest thing is they just look at the cost. They look at the price of the gas version and they look at the price of the electric. And without doing a Tesla where they talk about, hey, over 3 years, this is how much you're going to save. They just saw I can get a cheaper truck and I don't ever have to worry about what can't it do.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. So number one, dealerships are the issue. And if I could go back in time, I would tell Ford to set up a network of new electric car salespeople and dealerships and separate it, just like VW is doing right now. VW is got a whole new line of trucks that's just about ready to rock and roll. They offer a gas version of it that with a e-rev
You're
motor
talking
in
about
it.
Scout.
We're talking about the Scout. It's going to be at a separate dealership. I think one of the reasons Tesla is so successful is they didn't work with any other dealerships. They created their own thing, and every salesperson that walks in the door is an electric car enthusiast. And boy, does it make it. Pat and I walked into a Tesla dealership in Madison about 2 weeks ago. I cannot tell you how impressed I was with the sales force there. They were amazing, and they really knew their vehicle. And it's no wonder that, Tesla, a company that wasn't making money when they first started out, people were worried whether it was going to stay afloat. You know what? They stayed afloat, and despite the political problems their CEO has caused for his you know idiotic moves that did nothing but harm his company. I'm being a little political there, but that's just the plain truth. They still are selling those vehicles and would be selling a lot more because they have a separate dealership. So I say abandon the traditional network if it's not working for you. Now, wouldn't say that about Hyundai because they're selling vehicles. They're still selling vehicles right now, even though other companies aren't. But for the most part, the traditional model is a failure. Just go ask Lucid, just go ask Rivian, who all have separate dealerships from any traditional network.
And really, the line item I would have on there is that they started this program in 2022, and it seems to me they're pulling the plug on their Lightning, and we don't know what the future of the Mach-E is. Uh, they're pulling the plug just as the charging network is getting better. Um, you and I have been cruising around and not a small car. We were driving around an Ionic 9, which, it's not the most efficient car you could ever own. It's kind of a thirsty beast, but the charging network is so robust when we were driving around Wisconsin, and that video drops soon. It's really a pleasure. It isn't the experience we first had in Wisconsin. And I feel like all the other corporate people, I mean, look at Ayana, right? There's all kinds of people. GM is involved in that. Hyundai is involved in that. BMW is involved in that. Mercedes is involved in that. Ford didn't do anything with it.
Stellantis did,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
and they're the only ones worse than Ford. But
Yeah.
anyway,
You know,
they
but so I feel like, they're pulling the plug just as the market. And what's really really sad about it is that well, how is Ford going to meet its demand overseas for smaller cars and SUVs? Well, they signed two contracts. Number one, they already had signed with Volkswagen to build midsize SUVs. Now they've signed a contract with Renault to build small cars that are going to be made right in France. And, third, they've signed a contract with the Chinese manufacturer to sell over in the Eastern markets. They're basically taking the full-size Bronco, they're making a beautiful electric version of it, but very little of that vehicle from batteries, software, etc. Basically, the sheet metal on the outside looks like a Ford, but it's a Chinese EV. So, I just feel like Ford is pulling some plugs here that they shouldn't be.
Yep, and they took such a leadership position, right? I mean, who was the first company to adopt the North American charging standard, NACS standard, or Tesla standard? It's Ford. Yeah, those customers were the first to adopt, and it was wonderful. It was a great move. And just when there's so much new battery technology coming out that's going to drop the price of those batteries, we're going to drop the ball. And it just it's frustrating because in the rest of the world, the EV market is taking off and is the majority of cars sold in many parts of Europe and in China. It's just the future. Everybody knows it's the future, and because of the politics of what's going on, and we've got ignorant people saying that EVs were a ripoff and a con job, and all the ignorance that's being spread. Ford is going to change its ways immediately, and I'm just afraid they're no longer going to be a leader. And in 5 years, 5 years, they are going to regret that they didn't continue the leadership role because battery prices, as Pat's always telling me, is going to do what? What's going to happen to battery prices?
Yeah, two things are happening with batteries. Number one, they're coming up with different chemistries, right? And then number two is they're really focusing on their thermal management of those batteries that are made out of cheaper, basically cheaper materials. You know, uh, if we even have the Chinese focused on sodium batteries, which, there's no cheaper element you can get than salt. As these new materials come into the batteries and as thermal management gets better, I mean, here's the deal. What's going to happen in the short run? In the short run, batteries are going to start to get cheaper. And in the long run, it's going to get to a point where it's actually cheaper to produce an EV than it is a gas combustion engine. Just from the sheer number of parts alone, it's really getting that battery cost down, and that's going to happen. I'm just afraid that as we see that in the next 5 years, Ford is going to literally miss the boat, and largely they're going to have to rely on other overseas manufacturers right now to really produce the cars. And I
Yep.
don't think anybody in America wants to see that.
Right. And the other thing too is that look at BMW, right? BMW is on the verge of mass producing and putting onto the market amazing electric cars with phenomenal battery technology that comes from where? Where does their battery technology come from, Pat?
Well, they're working with Cattell. The BMW iX3, it's built on a 800 volt architecture, and it charges at 400 kilowatts. I mean, that's an amazing creation right there, and it's going to drop charging times down. It's going to do all kinds of things. Plus, the range is well over 300 miles. So,
Yep.
I mean, with that kind of combination coming, and knowing that Hyundai is working on their next generation, which will charge at 350 kilowatts versus, what Ford is producing now, which is on a good day about between 150 and 170. I mean, that new technology is going to hit the U.S. and but it's going to be produced by foreign companies. So I mean, the only one that's really OEM that's really in the game right now is GM, and of course their solution is build a truck with a huge battery that still charges fast. It's still very expensive, but as that battery cost comes down, that solution may work even better.
Yep. And GM is working on that constantly. And they're to the point where they do not have the profitability problem to the extent that Ford did. And I got to say, the other thing is, Ford, you really didn't put a second generation of those trucks out. You left it pretty much the same, much better software, but much better availability of parts Hey, I had an issue with my Ford truck. It was fixed in a week. Other dealerships, I swear, it would have been sitting on the lot for maybe months. And Ford had
Yeah.
my car up and running in a week. They've done so much in those areas, but they've really failed on the basics. And they never came out with a Gen 2, which should have happened almost immediately after the release of Gen 1.
Now they're saying that the Lightning isn't going to be dead. They're going to come out with an E-Rev version of it. Now, for those of you that don't know, an E-Rev is simply it's an EV that they put a combustion engine in, and it's really like your portable charger on wheels that will charge the battery. Usually it's a smaller battery, but that engine is not directly hooked up to the drivetrain. It's simply there as a generator. And, Volkswagen is going to offer a version of the Scout um, with an E-Rev. I mean, there's supposed to be the Ram Charger, right, which is supposed to be an E-Rev. And again, there's some Chinese manufacturers have done that. Um, and so, that's down the road, but it bothers me a little bit that the only thing that we hear about, yes, we'll produce an E-Rev, well, it'll have a 700-mile range. But there's nothing. It's like they haven't started this thing. It's a figment of what they want to do, but they had nothing to show people that they've even started the work on this thing. Yeah.
Tom Ognig, really good video on this very topic. And so we'll put a link below to that so that you can watch his video because I mean, he's irate. He should be. And where are the plans? Nowhere. They haven't even started this. And so, it's a little bit like they made this decision without having everything in place and look like a company that knew what it's doing.
In a lot of ways, we're at a point with EVs where, things are getting better in some of the areas. But of course, we're still dealing with the fact that, there used to be a $7,500 tax credit. In certain states, such as Colorado, used to offer the $3,500 tax credit. And for a lot of political reasons and those kinds of things, those are going away. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, we shouldn't be providing subsidies for these cars and vehicles. And okay, I get that. But at the same time, where's the subsidy for my fossil fuel car? Well, I get one every time I fill it up, right? Really, really good book pointed this out to me. Thomas Mann's The Climate Wars. He talked about even then that the fossil fuel industry was getting up to 60 billion a year in subsidies. And that just dwarfs what we were offering for people to try to get them into electrics. And so, one of the reasons why we look at it and we say in Wisconsin now gas is like 2.35 a gallon. Well, one of the main reasons of that is that it's heavily subsidized. Fossil fuel, including gasoline, is heavily subsidized by tax dollars. And so, and again, fine. I mean, I think there are a lot of vested interests that aren't really interested in seeing electric vehicles be uh, successful. And if you need to look for any further proof, just watch your average episode of Landman, and it'll point that out to you.
Yep, and if you go to Europe, there's little or no subsidies on fossil fuels, so you're paying twice the price, if not more, for gas, and it's no wonder why electric cars are booming there because let's face it, they're already less expensive to buy just on the fuel alone because they aren't subsidizing gas cars in Europe.
And I look at this as in the terms of what we would have called an education and implementation dip that we're in right now as we're still struggling. And again, I guess I'm rather surprised to see an OEM pull the plug on a major vehicle rather than have it be a startup. But that's where we're at. And again, I in the long run, and I was a little upset about this, but in the long run, you really need to look at it. The infrastructure for EVs is getting better, which will make a much easier experience for customers. EVs themselves are actually getting better. I mean, we talked about this in the Iona video that plug-in charge that Hyundai has right now. I mean, one of the things that would frustrate my wife when she would try to charge the car is that all these processes with apps and things that you have to go through. And here with a Hyundai, man, she just pulls up to, an Iona station and plugs it right in, and voila, it's easier than gas because you aren't dealing with the fumes. You're not dealing with getting anything on your hand. You don't even have to swipe the credit card. You just
Yep.
plug it in and it charges.
And go right back in your warm car because the whole process takes about 30 seconds and you're back in your warm car. Well, I just want to take a moment here that we've almost used up our time today. And I want to thank Brother Pat for being on the podcast today. We've got a lot more to say about where cars are in the year 25 and particularly 26 here coming up. And we look forward to our next podcast, which is going to continue this conversation. But hey, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so because we want to keep this thing going. Your support of the channel is very important. We really enjoy doing this, and what we're really doing in this podcast is we let you into our morning conversations that we have in the car all the time. I'll be on the phone with Pat. Pat will be on the phone with me, and we talk ours. And so this is kind of like our version of the conversation that happens in the car. So hey, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. Pat, what do you say?
Yep, people have a great time, and again, those people who love EVs as much as we do, it's not time to despair. It's just time to look out over the horizon a little bit and see all the good things. And just a really quick reminder that don't drive as slow as my brother
Yep,
drives.
and don't drive like my brother, which is usually way too fast and too much regen. And if you haven't gotten a chance to go to an Iona station, go do it because that's the future of charging. And so if there's one anywhere near around you, just for fun, go try it out because that's the game changer. And we're going to have that in the next episode I put up as a regular video. That's going to be our topic. So once again, thanks, Brother Pat. Hey, we'll see you soon.
Yep, take care.